But yeah, before we dive into all that juiciness, we are going to do our recap as always. And if you find yourself on just our recap video, be sure to check the description below for a link to our full video where we will be discussing all of our harebrained theories and, crackpot ideas. But yeah, without further ado, let's jump into this recap of episode 60 of campaign 3. I'm desperately trying to find the title.
I think it
Faith
was a
or
feast.
Famine.
Oh, I was gonna say feast and famine. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we pick back up with Team AOL, plus our trio of 3 new guest characters, having found themselves in a Silra after the. Your camera just went out, just in case you didn't know. Um,
Had to blow my nose, so
okay,
I
yeah,
just thought I would spare people from,
no
you know,
worries, just making
that.
sure.
Thank you,
Um,
though. I'll be back 1 second, okay?
okay, we find them in a Silra after the events of the solstice have ported them everywhere. They've come together and they are basically trying to head towards the closest civilization. Prism again brings up that if we can get her hands on a scry spell, then she can use that to help them locate their friends. Um, Sorry, my notes just freaked out. Also, while she's talking about this, she does reveal that she holds the record for the longest apprenticeship of all time. The crew, as they're traveling, eventually come to a road sign and see that there's basically 2 directions pointing on it. One is to Endovar, and the other is to Athansia. They determine that basically from where they are, that the closest town to them is probably Hearthdale, so they decide to head that way. As they continually traveling, it's mostly uneventful, but they do come across what remains of a gallows, a seemingly out of use gallows. It's very creepy, and there are a number of unmarked graves around. They spend a little bit of time, like, kind of feeling out this area, but they're like, maybe we should just, get out of here. And they can see the ley lines still in the sky from the solstice, and they can actually see what appears to be like a nexus point, seemingly up ahead of them, potentially right above where Hearthdale is, where they're headed.
Yeah,
Um,
interesting.
and in noticing all of this, they can also, a few of the party rather, can notice that there's like a different like smell in the air. There's a change in the air, and they realize that illusion magic seems to be enhanced, probably because of the solstice, obviously. So they arrive in town ultimately, and it's kind of a people are looking at them but not really greeting them. Bit of a weird vibe. And they ultimately run into 2 figures. One is this armored guard looking guy who has a symbol of the Dawnfather on him. And the other is this older man in overalls, the latter of which is named Hinder. And the party begins to talk with him. Orm admits they're a bit lost, and Prism's like, "Is everything okay in this town? There's kind of like a weird vibe here." And, obviously with the solstice craziness that just happened. And when they ask this, the armored figure steps up and is like, "Hey, like, who are you guys? What are you doing here?" And they say, "We're just passing through, And he's like, "Okay, well, points them to a local tavern, like where they could maybe spend the night." They then continue their conversation with Hinder, and he says, "Yeah, the past few weeks here have been pretty strange. Lots of weird people have been coming through town. I don't know too much though, so you should really talk to Prolif or the Elder." And so the party is like, okay. They decide, let's head through town and try to find somebody else to talk to. And the first thing they notice is the presence of a huge temple here, one that
Mhm.
is like far larger than it should be for a town of this size. And they're like, that's interesting, but let's go talk to that Prolif guy first. So they head to the apothecary where Prolif is and find him inside. They tell him about what happened to them and how they got teleported and grouped up here. And he says, "Oh, that's good news because 11 people vanished from our town last night. And if you guys are okay, hopefully they're okay as well." And he tells them there was this big event last night to celebrate the solstice. Um, and afterwards, this craziness happened and 11 people vanished. He also tells them that lots of Athansian agents have been coming to the town recently, along with adjudicators, and says that the activity from the temple and these types of people in the last few months has really been ramping up in preparation for the solstice, and that these temple people warned the city that the solstice was going to happen and kind of prepared them for it. But the people here, they're not really that religious. They're not really like the god types. They're more pagan, and they believe in what's called the loam and the leaf, which basically means they're more in tune with the land and the spirits and
Right.
the elementals here, and believe that those spirits and elementals will take care of them more so than any deity. Um, he also fills them in on a little bit about the town and said there's two like main mills here, which are the like sources of industry, run by two families. The two families are the Rain Maid, which they've been here a really long time, and they're very good about like having a proper balance with nature and like their lumber extraction and what have you. But then there are also the Silver Culls, who are a more recent addition in the grand history of the town, and they are very wealthy, and they are taking way more than initially was agreed upon from the land. But Prolif isn't sure like what the reaction to that is, because he says it's the elder's job to communicate with the spirits. So he's not sure if like the spirits are upset about that or not. Um, as they continue talking, they kind of notice that Prolif is like getting a bit more guarded with these answers, as these strangers are just kind of, keep riddling him with questions. And
Yeah.
it's at that point that Prism uses a spell. I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a secret note message that she writes that only
Yeah.
Prolif can see. Basically saying like, hey, I know you maybe can't talk right now, but is there anywhere we should go or talk to where you could speak freely? And Prolif basically tells them about this cottage that they should go to get more answers. And after that, the party does pick up a few items. They get a few healing potions, and Bordor actually barters some beef jerky for a bunch of laxatives.
Yeah.
And so then the party take their leave and they decide to go speak with the elder. As they're walking and talking, Team AOL catches up the newbies on basically everything that we as viewers know. The down low on Vasselheim and the adjudicators in relation to Ludinus and the gods and Predathos and all the different machinations of what's going on in this solstice, and like, Ludinus wanting to wipe out the gods, all that jazz. And eventually they come to this cottage that Prolif told them about. They go up, knock on the door, and as soon as they do, these two vines like immediately detach and like coil down like serpents. And then a peephole opens up and is like, "Can I help you?" And the party says, "We're here to speak to the elder. Prolef sent us." And they explain what happened to them, that they got teleported during the solstice and ended up here. The door opens, and then we are revealed to this Goliath woman, over 6 feet tall, in her 60s, and that's basically where we go to break.
And then do you pronounce her name Abadina? Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so coming back from break, it is now this conversation in Elder Abadina's abode. And they're basically like, hey, we've been sent to you by Prolapse or, Prolef. And basically is like, can you help us? We've heard that you can help us. And similar to Prolef, Abadina is also a bit weary of the party. And essentially, as the party tells them the scoop, which Laudna informs them like, hey, we were everywhere and now we're here. Abadina is basically like, hey, we've had a lot of people come through town. I don't know if I can trust you. Like, do you have any proof of this? And Prism presents, I think, like a library card or something from the Cobalt Soul. But then her wizard book, Dinios, basically is like, yes, I can confirm everything that has been told is true. Still from that though, she also Abadina also casts some kind of spell where she releases like these reddish spores and invites Orim to inhale them. And as Orim does, he sort of has like this experience of sort of reliving quickly in his memory, sort of rehashing all the memories that he's been through. And Abadina seems to share in these memories in some way. And that is certainly enough to confirm that everything they're saying is true. Abadina asks them, "Hey, what do you guys think of the prime deities?" And not unlike Team Wildmount, you have a few people being like, screw them, I don't care about them. And then Orem really has this amazing. Liam O'Brien has, by the way, just incredible, several incredible lines in this episode.
Yeah.
But Orem basically says, in taking basically defense for the deities, which we've seen him do before, basically says like, hey, it's really not so much the deities that I have a problem with. It's often the followers who do the poorest job of representing them well. And there is a great conversation here where Abedina is basically talking about how, with this moment with Ruidus happening, her connection to the earth and spirits, like something primal, has been unlocked and awoken. And it's not really clear exactly what she's referring to, but she basically says there are these eidolons that are no longer fearful of the deities, that are rising up. And again, not unlike what we've seen with Team Wildmount, Abedina essentially just basically says that to see the deities gone would be good. It would be freeing for the people. And she admits that she too heard the voice of Ludinus Deleth, and Orem basically, in sort of pleading the defense of the deities, basically says, what if I told you I stood 50 feet from this man and that he would kill anyone to get the job done, like to get his way? He has to roll a persuasion check, only hits a 12, and unfortunately, Abedina basically says that may be true and he may be misguided, but it's sort of like the ends justify the means. Like, if this leads us to being free from the gods, then so be it. Regardless, the party's like, well, hey, can you help us? Like, we just want to get back to our friends. And Abedina basically says, yes, I can help you. I have this thing called a scrying well that you can use to at least find your friends, but I need some help from you first. And the party's basically like, well, how do we know we can trust you? There is a nat 20 from Prism where she's like, I think we can trust her. But basically asks, what is the nature of this scrying well? And Abedina basically explains that she has been able to use it to locate a few of the missing 11 people who were bamped out of the town, one of which got teleported to like the middle of the ocean. Yikes. And presumably died. But other than that, I think the girl that was missing or someone who was missing was like in a forest, and the party's basically like, okay, this works. Like, this kind of magic works. So they're like, what can we do? And Abedin basically says that the Bastion soldiers who were there on behalf of the Dawnfather and Vasselheim have been a real thorn in their side, and they are looking to take back the city. And if they're in, to meet at the brewery in only 15-20 minutes from now. So the party heads to the brewery, and it's sort of like a town hall meeting. It is this sort of shady, quiet group of many townspeople within this brewery. And just skipping through some of the details, basically Abedina's going to come in and she gives this speech. She sort of rallies everyone and says, like, today's the day we take back what was rightfully ours. And anyone who's not up for the task, because some people may die, you can go stand over there, and everyone else, like, step forward. And the party's like, okay, what choice do we have? Let's do this. Even Orem reluctantly is like, okay, it's time we do this. And get another awesome line from Orem. And basically, they all agree, like, hey, we're going to help. And the party's also kind of joking with the townspeople, being like, hey, I need some of you guys to know that some of you are probably going to die, including you, Chad. And Matt has this very, like, adolescent teenager, douchey Chad character who's great. But Bordor is he's never been in battle before. And so he's like, well, hang on, we're not going to, like, kill these people, right? And they're kind of like, I mean, yeah. And he's like, well, hang on, before we do this, let's see if we can talk to them. Let's see if we can, like, convince them to maybe leave the town, which we all know this isn't going to work, or happen this way. But basically, he's like, I have tobacco. We have beer. Let's see if we can just, if Orem can talk to them and say, like, what he knows about Ludus Deleth, maybe he'll be able to sort of talk them down. So they basically are like, all right, we'll let this happen, but we're going to be ready to pounce when it gets to if it gets to that point.
Yeah.
Party goes over to the temple. They know there's at least 2 judicators in the town. And Orem and Border basically go up to the temple and they're like, "Hey, man, you want some weed or tobacco? We got beer." And they're basically like, "We're here to convert," you know. And there's some good rolls that happen, and the guards people are like, "Okay, yeah, sure." So they start drinking beer, they start smoking tobacco. Bordor cleverly, actually, when the guards aren't looking, pours the laxatives into the beer that then gets passed around. And then while they're talking, Bordor is like, "Hey, my friend here knows something like, world ending. You need to listen to them." Which they're kind of like, "Wait, what?" And so Orem basically starts to share, like, "Hey, I need to be able to talk to your leader, the Flame Keeper or Flame Guide." I don't remember which one was the title, but Kiro was the name. It's the person who sort of runs the temple. And the guard's like, "Okay, I'll go get Kiro." And so from like this tower or rampart of the temple, Kiro basically comes out and is like very put off by Bordor and Orem. They're like, "Okay, you've come, you've given my soldiers beer. What do you want?" And Orem basically spills the beans on everything Ludneth is wanting to do. And like, "Your fight isn't here. Your fight is in Marquette. Like, leave these people alone." And again, there's a request for a roll, not a great roll from Orem. And so Kiro basically says, "All right, take them prisoner. We'll take them to Vasselheim and we can corroborate their story." And Orem basically has this awesome line where he says, "Well, that's unfortunate." And immediately battle erupts. The townspeople come in. Orem is going to hit one of the guards with the butt of his sword and then grow a vine out with seedling and then basically throw the guard across the way, like into a tower. Chaos erupts. Prism is going to dimension door with Denise into the temple, which was the plan. And immediately once they get in there, which Matt brings out, by the way, it's a two-part battle arena. It's the outdoor and then the indoor, like, temple court.
Yeah.
Looks insane. And there's immediately a adjudicator in the temple court. So they're like, oh, we didn't mean to get here, actually." But basically, we know there's a massive battle coming, and that's where the episode ends. Episode 60 of Faith and Famine, or Famine.
Yes.
And again, that's the recap. If you want to see our whole discussion, we'll have a link in this episode description. But yeah, so goodness, there was a lot to talk about there.